Lieutenant Colonel Steve George and Master Sergeant Shane Perrett. Lieutenant Colonel George is a basic branch as a transportation officer. That'd be the 88 Mike that was up here. He is now a multifunctional logistics officer. Bachelor's degree, master's degree. He's also promotable, so soon he'll be Colonel George. Master Sergeant Shane Perrett is near and dear to my heart. He's near and dear to my heart. He's a Jedi. He is a master gunner of the M1A2 main battle tank. That was my office and home for several years. And so without any further ado, he also has a bachelor's degree, very representative of the highly educated soldiers we have. I'll introduce these two young men and ask them to come up here and talk to us about the Soldier for Life program.
All right, good morning, everyone. How y'all doing today? Before I get into introducing our presentation, I do want to address the question about PTSD a little bit, because unlike what Mr. Davidson said, I actually don't have anything in this presentation about it. And that's kind of on purpose, because from our perspective, yes, there are soldiers out there, just as there are civilians, that have PTSD, that have traumatic brain injury. I myself, 22 years ago, I had an argument in a tree jumping out of an airplane, and it won. The answer really to your question is, if you're recruiting, we work with companies that actually recruit those with PTSD and TBI, because they have termed positions that they think are good for them. They may be quieter, may be in some sort of position where they just think it's right for that type of audience. And then you all, for those that have veterans in your organization, probably have folks that you don't know have PTSD and TBI. So really, to go back to the question, to the heart of it, my recommendation is, if you have hired an employee, veteran or otherwise, that all of a sudden there seems to be some sort of symptoms that make you go, PTSD, TBI, there's issues here. What we like to do is, we call it the no wrong door policy in our organization, meaning that's someone that you know needs help. And in the military, it's very customary for us to say, hey, battle buddy, something's wrong in your life. Let's go talk to somebody and get help. And what we would encourage you to do in your businesses is do the same thing. And right here in Middle Tennessee, as Jeff pointed out, for the veterans, you have two great VA facilities. In particular, I believe the one, sir, we talked last night, one of them really focuses on mental health. Is that the one here or the one north? The one right here focuses on mental health, which really gets into some of that PTSD and TBI. But there are all kinds of organizations that help there. So really, to go back, what I don't want to do, and it's the reason we don't put it in this presentation, is the majority of your veterans, the majority of Americans, of individuals that have some sort of event that leads to PTSD or TBI, it's controllable. It's fine. There is no negative aspect in their life about it. Unfortunately, in the military and in government, you don't hear about that. We get scared a little bit, because what do we hear? We hear about the guy, and Master Sergeant Perrett and I are based out of D.C., so about 12, 18 months ago, the veteran that shot up the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C. You hear about those onesie, twosie things, but they're nationalized, they're front page news. You don't hear about the 99% of the other folks that are functioning just fine. So I hope that helps. The encouragement there is, they exist already. They're functioning just fine. But for the few that you notify, that you recognize that need help, please, the request is get them help. And part of it, and you'll see in our program, if you ever need help finding somewhere to refer someone to help, if you don't have any other resources locally, you will always have our program to fall back on. So, ma'am, I hope that answers a little bit of your question. But with that, go into what we're here for. So I'm Lieutenant Colonel Steve George, and I'm with Master Sergeant Shane Perrett. We work for the Chief of Staff of the Army in his Soldier for Life program up here. I could talk for probably 3 days on the multiple different things that we do as Soldier for Life programs. For the veterans in here, for those that are retired, those still serving, I want you to know you are Soldiers for Life, because that's one of the premises of this program, is for folks to know that once you've served, you are always a soldier. But I could talk about many, many things we do, but what I want to share with you, our program's about 3 years old. I want to share with you what we've learned over 3 years of the challenges that you have, in the success stories, in the items we've learned in the HR realm on how you can access, hire, retain veterans in your organization, since that's really what this is about. So first, before I turn it over to Shane to talk about a little bit of what we do, because the majority of this we're going to talk about ideas for hiring veterans, but we also have to give a little snapshot of what we do. So Shane's going to do that, but I want to thank a few people first. Colonel Davidson, Beth, thank you for having us and putting this on. Putting something like this on is no small feat. As simple as it can seem sometimes, it takes a lot of work and effort. So thank you for putting it on, and thank you for inviting us. You got us out of the daily commute in D.C., and we're down here where traffic's a little more bearable. And then the second thing is for all of you that are here with the interest of hiring and accessing veterans and getting them into your organizations. Thank you for taking the time to be here. I'd like to say that hiring a veteran will be the best business decision that you will make. Has nothing to do with doing the right thing and being patriotic. It has the right thing to do for your business. And we've had that feedback from multiples of companies across the country. So thank you for that. And we have a lot of things to talk about in here. We're going to share what I'm doing, and the reason I'm down here on the floor is I want this to be interactive. So if you have questions and so on as we go, please feel free to share those ideas with us. And before I turn it over to Shane, I'm going to leave you with one last thought, is the United States Army is the largest producer of talent in the world. We're 50% of DOD, and our folks, you've heard, we're not going to go in there. The commissioner talked about it, Beth talked about it, and Jeff talked about the value of a veteran. I could talk for hours on that. We've already heard that, but what I want you to know is we produce that talent. These folks are trainable in whatever capacity you need. They already have the basics that you want with them to show up for work, be proactive, do their job, and then some. So thank you for you all for being here. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Sergeant Perrett so he can go. He'll tell a little bit what we do, and then we'll turn it back to me, and we'll talk about some ideas with hiring veterans.
Thank you, sir, for the introduction. I'm the new guy to the team, so thank you, Murfreesboro, for letting me cut my teeth with you guys. First, we'll talk about the Soldier for Life program and what it is that we do. As every great organization, there's a mission statement. If you read the mission statement, you see connect is underlined, because that's really what we do, is we connect these resources out here in the community back to the soldiers, family members, and the veterans. So how do we do that? If you look at in the middle on the left there, that circle, that's our soldier life cycle. And it's never too early to look at what do I want to be when I hang up my camouflage suit, right? It can be day one of your career, whether it's going to be your first term, you want to do 3 or 4 years, or you're going to be a retired soldier and do 20 or 30 years. So it's never too early to start looking at what you want to be. When I say soldier, we're actually talking about the regular Army, the National Guard, and the Reserve soldiers. Okay? We do that through our lines of effort, the Army, the government, and the community. As you see, community is underlined because that's where we think it actually begins at. I look at it this way, is we took the soldier from the community, we trained him, and now we're going to give him back to the community. And we look at the 3 areas that we focus on: education, health, and employment. Unemployment gets most of our attention because we think that those social things that they're going through, whether it's suicide, unemployment, or homelessness, that if they're unemployed, those other social indicators will take care of themselves. And in doing so, we want to sustain that premier all-volunteer Army. We think that soldier that has a successful transition is going to go back out to the community, whether it's a leader in the community or a baseball coach, teaching the community, the kids, coaching them. He's going to tell a story. It's going to encourage other soldiers to give more of themselves, other children, so they become, hopefully, a soldier. All right, so talk a little bit of how we're broke down. As you see at the top left, that's our leadership, our director, deputy director, and our sergeant major. Each of the color codes represent the 4 regions. Each region has a lieutenant colonel, post command, means he's already had his command as a battalion commander, and they're matched up with a master sergeant. All the master sergeants have been successful first sergeants. So we think that is the best set there to go out and travel to find those resources to bring back to the community. So Colonel George and I have the southeast, the region. Colonel George, like I said, he's leaving soon, so I'll be the continuity there. Upper left, you got on the left side, you got the western region. Lieutenant Colonel, Master Sergeant. Sergeant Mulligan is leaving. He's going to go to the Sergeant Major Academy. So almost out of every region, someone is leaving this summer. However, the names may change, the phone numbers will not change. All right, so this is really your first look at resources for you. On the far left is the function areas. We cover employment, education, retirement services. He's actually in our office, Mr. John Radke. And our national programs and strategic outreach. All right, so why do we do what we do? All right, these 4 quadrants here, most of it's all veteran except for the top right. That's just Army specific. We've heard talk earlier about the great state of Tennessee's unemployment and how it's going down. If you look from the red line, work at the bottom going up, the red line represents all veterans unemployment. The middle line is the national average. That upper line, the green line there, is the soldiers that got out between the ages of 18 and 24. So you see they're well above the national average. And even though these numbers are going down, there's still lots of work that we can do to get them all the way down. The next one to the right, the Army unemployment compensation comparison. When this office was stood up in 2012, you see how much money the Army was paying for unemployment compensation. $500 million, $503 million. So how do we measure success? We talked earlier, I think Beth did, about how do we measure success. It's kind of hard to do, right? We don't know if those soldiers or transitioning members were hired or not. It's really hard to tell. So we look at this as a measurement. Between 2012 and 2014, the unemployment compensations went down $165 million. That's great. There's still a lot more work that we can do. The bottom left there talks about the Joint Forces Coalition. That's a White House initiative by Michelle Obama and Dr. Jill Biden. What it is, it's a commitment of businesses to hire veterans and their spouses. And currently, I think they just made a new commitment of $700,000 for 15. And then the bottom right, the VEC. We'll hear a lot more about the VEC coming up next few slides. But it's a VA-ran web portal, all right, directed by the government. This is how we connect the transitioning service members, the family members of those, and veterans to you guys seeking them. This is how we connect you guys. And we're going to talk more about the VEC coming up next few slides. And we talked earlier about Mr. Harold Riggins and his crew out here doing good stuff with the VEC. You go, sir. Talk about the resources and how we're going to connect you guys.
Okay, so I think this portion of what we're going to get to is really what you all out there in the audience really want to get to. How do I access these veterans? How can I get them into my organization? So I worked with a SHRM up in the state of Virginia, and then this is also from feedback from the companies that we've interacted with nationwide. So I will put out the public service announcement that this is not the fix-all. This is kind of genericized because we have all sorts of sizes and flavors of companies. You have companies that have already veteran recruiting experience and success, and then you have those that haven't even started yet. So we try and do this very genericized. It's not the fix-all, but I think it's a good start from all the feedback we've received. So when we talk about, one of the first things every business asks us about, how can I get access to veterans? So there's several ways. First, you've already heard in some of our opening comments, Shane mentioned it, there is the Veterans Employment Center, called the VEC. This is run by the VA. It is an online portal where employers, free of charge, can list your company and your job openings. And I see Harold is up here staring at me, giving me the laser eyes. Harold, raise your hand. So Harold is the transition manager from Fort Campbell. They say Kentucky, but really most of it's in Tennessee. 85% in Tennessee. I asked why my last visit to Fort Campbell, and the quick answer was the post office for the installation is on the Kentucky side of the border, so therefore it is Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Anyway, so the Veterans Employment Center, soldiers or veterans, this is a broad-ranging tool. Veterans currently serving and their adult dependents from any branch of service can post their resumes on here, and if your company registers into the VEC and posts job openings on there, they can go ahead and look at your openings and apply for them through this. So it is a free tool for you. Knowing that some businesses don't have large recruiting budgets, this is a great tool. Harold, who raised his hand, has a table set up with 2 experts on getting enrolled into the VEC. Now I'm going to tell you, this is a relatively new tool. It was about this time last year we were at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, when the First Lady said, this is going to be our tool of choice. Up to that point, we had about 3 different websites going on in the military, in government, and she said this would be the one. And we all went, oh, I guess we got to get busy. And so it is a work in progress. It is not perfect. It is getting better each and every day. And so I encourage you, one of the feedback we have from a lot of employers I've worked with in Georgia is that when you register, one of the requirements is to have your employer identification number, which is basically your tax ID number for your organization. That is how the VA goes in and makes sure that you are a valid employer. Because for every honest broker that's out there, there's also a scam artist. And so that is how they do their check and balance. So that is something you will need. Now that won't keep you from getting started today with Harold and his team out in the back here. But that is the one thing that you will need to finalize your registration into that system. The web link for it you can see down here at the bottom of the page. And I will tell you, if you get registered and start having difficulties, Harold and his team can try and help. There's also this technical support that's out there, but we've also had some feedback that they're not overly responsive sometimes. If that's the case, we can go back to the slide, or you can get the slides from Beth. Our contact, Shane and I's contact, and other people in our office, we have direct link to those that run this thing, the Veterans Employment Center. Now, the other thing I'm going to put on here before we go to the next slide, you're going to hear different people talk about this in different ways. You hear us call the Veterans Employment Center, you hear the VEC, and then you're going to hear e-benefits. E-benefits is the portal that you get access to the VEC on. So if you hear any of those, if you hear someone say, oh, I'm using e-benefits to look for jobs, that means they're using this tool, the Veterans Employment Center. If you hear them say the VEC or Veterans Employment Center, just that way, if you hear those words, don't want to have any confusion out there, it's all in one the same. Now, there are other tools out there in this automated world. Many of them you have to pay for. You have to go what is right for your company, for your business, but I'm here to tell you this is the government's tool that's given, and it doesn't cost you anything to use. Another great way to access veterans is hiring our heroes. It is a subset of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. I think Beth mentioned it. They are great. They hold hiring summits across the country on installations and in local communities that are geared towards hiring veterans and their spouses, a big thing for spouses. They do an absolutely tremendous job with these programs. It doesn't cost you, the participant, anything to attend these as the employer, other than if you have to travel somewhere, you obviously have to pay for your travel and your hotel rooms and stuff like that. I throw them up there. You have their website down here, Chamber of Commerce Foundation, Hiring Our Heroes. There are too many dates. They go across the country. They do 2 or 3 events a week across the country. So if you keep an eye on their website, you can find when there's one coming closer locally to you, or if there's one in an area you want to go to, you're more than happy to. You register all on their website. And I see some people scrunching their eyes trying to write down the web address there. I'll read it off real quick, but you can get access to these slides. Is this right, Beth? On the Chamber's website after this event. But for that one, it's www.uschamberfoundation, all one word, uschamberfoundation.org/hiring-our-heroes. Another thing that Hiring Our Heroes has done is they've created a thing called the Employer Roadmap, which is what's depicted here on the right side of the screen. What this is, it's a series of tools that you can use, and it's tailorable based on your type and size company, small, medium, large, no veterans hiring experience, all the way to extensive veterans hiring experience. Again, this is a free of charge a web tool, and it will help guide you through many of the things we're going to talk about in subsequent slides with hiring veterans. And again, that web page is down here. This is the bottom one, and it's just www.employerroadmap.org. It's a great tool, but those are all free for you to use, and it's offered through the Hiring Our Heroes Foundation. Really, my big thing to them is please just go on their website and look at the dates. If you see something you're interested in, that's great. I don't know when our next large summit's coming up at Fort Campbell. I believe it's late this year, October of this year. So probably about 2 or 3 months before that, the registration link will go up on the Hiring Our Heroes webpage. This will be a 2-day event, potentially 3 days, held at Fort Campbell, where you'll have access to all the soldiers getting ready to depart the Army in the next 12 to 18 months, just at Fort Campbell. But we do them at installations really worldwide. We've got one coming up in Vicenza, Italy, at the end of this month, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri in early May, and then Fort Gordon, Georgia in June. So those are the next big 3. Those are on installations. There are others across the nation where they're just coming to cities to do events as well. And then I'll throw out there, Lindsay, are you back there? We talked earlier. There is a neat connection with this back to here. I just learned this morning. Lindsay and her company, they actually are the masterminds behind the web page here. So if you get a link that doesn't work, find Lindsay and tell her, hey, your stuff is broken. Here, connection to transition service managers. So what I've done is worked from the big picture down to the smaller picture. The big picture was that big outreach. You could get veterans of all flavors through those web links. Now, probably one of your best resources in here, and I already had Harold raise his hand, but raise it again, Harold, is connecting to the transition service managers on the 74 installations worldwide. Now, you heard Jeff already talked about the 1/3 rule. That's absolutely right. A third of an installations, when they get out, are going to stay where they're at. A third are going home, wherever that may be, and a third to go wherever the job will take them. But at the end of the day, so right here, you can probably target 66%, maybe a little more, of what Harold has to offer. That's $500 a month, but that he has getting out. But you have folks in a pipeline that are going from, that's $500 every month. So what's that? About 6,000 soldiers in the next 12 months are getting out of Fort Campbell alone. Other installations, Fort Bragg has 1,200, 1,000 to 1,200 a month in North Carolina. You have Fort Stewart, Georgia, not overly far away, Fort Knox, Kentucky, a couple hundred a month, not too far away. What I want to do is take a second here at this one and tell you, in the veterans hiring community, I know a lot of you have your opening now. You want to hire someone right now. We call it in the Army, we call it tactical patience, and Jeff alluded to this a little bit. The thing here is build the relationships. As you know, in HR, and everything we do, it's all about relationships. Build the pipeline. What Harold has is a pipeline. He can only give you potentially maybe that are going to stay here about 300 a month. But that's 300 a month every month if you get up there and build that relationship and get those folks interested that are maybe 6 to 8 to 10 months, a little early for you to hire them, but now they're really thinking about you. It's marketing your company and stuff, and that's all about those relationships, and every installation has that. So you can target those folks. Now, there may be some large companies in here, and the reason I use the backdrop of our map on here is you can leverage Harold to get in touch with any of these installation managers worldwide, or you can leverage us. Doesn't matter to us. Our hope is that we just get a veteran into a job, or a soon-to-be veteran into a job, or a spouse. But if you say you're a large company and you have a need to hire someone for a job in Georgia, leverage us. We'll get you in touch because your target of audience are probably those installations there. Can be Harold, can be here because he's probably got folks that want to go back to Georgia. But you can leverage him for that introduction because he knows all his counterparts, or you can leverage Shane and I or any of our counterparts that are up on this screen. But they are a gold mine for you as our transition managers. All right, this next part is, so that's really how you can access soldiers. There's probably other ways, but those are the ways that we see people having success with, and or in the case of the Veterans Employment Center, I have to tell you about that because I'm a government representative as well. So the next part is where I really work closely with Sheila, who is a SHRM veteran herself from Virginia, because the next thing is companies always ask us, well, what does that mean in military speak? What did they do? Now, there's far too, as Jeff showed in his slide, far too many individual specialties to go through. So I can't do that, or we'd be up here for about 4 years. But what we try to do is kind of take what we have with rank and experience to what that responsibility or maybe that job would be in a civilian sector. This is kind of generalized. So on the left-hand side, those are our enlisted ranks. And what I failed to do, and I told myself I should have done this, the enlisted ranks E1 to E4, that's private through specialist. And I was supposed to write that in there because you'll see that on the resume isn't going to be a symbol in an E1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to have what it was. E4 through 6, that's corporal, sergeant, and staff sergeant. E7, 8, that's sergeant first class and master sergeant, or you can get into what we call first sergeant. And then E9 is sergeant major and command sergeant major. Officers on the right, the bars, the gold and the silver bar are lieutenants. The railroad track, next set of 2 silver bars is captain. The gold leaf is major. The silver leaf is lieutenant colonel, and then the eagle is colonel. And you can kind of see where we go down from that junior level. Someone who does one tour in the military that's coming out, probably as a specialist or private first class, it's probably at your entry level for your organization. And as you start going up, you have people that were supervisors, counselors, then we get more into administration and management, specific personnel operations, logistics, and so on. All the way down to, you get to that E9 level, you can see the different things on there. Really, folks that are out there planning, projecting, program managers, extensive background. Most of these people, in terms of service, up here, you're probably talking 4 years or less. Here, 3 to 6 years, could be even 3 to 10 years. Here you're talking 8 to 15, 15 all the way up to 30 and beyond. Over here, your lieutenants, anywhere from 3 to 4 years. A captain is 6 to 10. Majors 10 to about 16. Lieutenant colonel 16 to 20 plus. And then a colonel's at that 20 plus range. So that you can see they have, in terms of, if you think if someone's been in your company for that many years, where that person may be. So that's just a overall thing. Another way we look at it, different terms you may hear in your organization or you may see on a resume. It says I was a squad leader, I was an operations sergeant, I was a company commander. These are somewhat generic, but where we see what that civilian equivalent would be. Again, it's not the answer all, but you take, I'll talk, well, Shane was a first sergeant. That was his thing. He took care of his people and he made sure they had whatever they needed to do logistically to do their job. Managed how many people? He had 350. So it tells you he's taking care of them and their families. My last job before this, I was a battalion commander. I had about 1,200 soldiers under me with all kinds of different specialties. We had engineers, intelligence, communications, and logistics. I had some armor guys, some infantry guys, so it was all in there. So you can see in terms of leadership where it falls in there, especially when you start looking senior leadership. The other thing I tell you, we alluded to it early in some of the earlier briefs or opening remarks, was a soldier, even if they weren't in a leadership role, a management role, they actually are personal leaders because they have to lead themselves each and every day, take care of their equipment each and every day. They're not waiting for someone else to do it for them. So even if they didn't hit one of these positions that are up there, they still have basic inherent leadership traits with them. So here's this next thing really hits the HR realm, in my opinion. So we're talking about what are your processes and procedures for hiring a veteran. So you have access to them now, hopefully. You kind of can look a little bit at what, on these charts, a little comparison of what they did in the military, how it may compare to you. But is your process user-friendly for a veteran? First thing I'll ask on there is a job description. You can see the example up there. Must have. Do you have a veteran-friendly job description? Not asking to do anything illegal or anything that is wrong for your company, but do I really need a bachelor's degree, or could I have equivalent military experience? Maybe you do. Obviously, you get into some specialty areas, you have to have that bachelor's degree. Or do I need 10 years of experience as an HR person, or could I have some sort of equivalent military experience? So that you don't automatically eliminate the veteran. Because I could tell you, a lot of veterans, they'll see this. You might be saying out there, oh, I'd hire you right now today for that job, but you didn't apply for it. Yeah, I didn't apply because it says I have to have a bachelor's degree. I don't have a bachelor's degree. That's a basic example, but you got to look at that through all your duty descriptions or your job descriptions. Next thing is, what is your method? How do you know that person, if your goal is to hire a veteran, what is your method of applying for the job so that you know the person is a veteran? If you do online applications, do you have a separate link potentially? Some do, for a veteran applicant that kind of says, let's make sure we scrutinize this resume a little closer. Or if it's in person, do you have a separate pile? Here's my veteran applicants, here's my non-veteran applicants. It just, how do you know? Because in the end, we know that sometimes you got to put a little extra love into the veteran's resume. Now, we're working hard in the military. We have an updated, Harold can attest to this, we've changed our transition policies and procedures over the past couple of years to make sure a soldier has a better resume coming to you that's more easily understandable by you. But we still have to work at it because we've never done one before. I came out of college, I worked at a hardware store as a 16-year-old. There was no resume to do that. I filled out an application. Been in the Army now 22 years. I have never done a civilian resume, and most of our brethren whether they serve one tour or whether they do a 20, 30-year career. They've never done that resume. It's hard to figure out what you put on there. The other thing we'd recommend is using a veteran to assist with your resumes. If you're a large company, you may have a budget where you could hire a veteran to do that. But if you're a small company, I understand you don't have a budget, but a couple of the smaller companies that have success with this, they realize, hey, Steve was in the Army for a few years. He works out there on the line. Let me take this resume to him and see if he understands what this guy means. It says he was a squad leader. And then Steve, who's working the line, looks at it for a couple minutes and said, yeah, this is what he did. So there's ways of doing it. If you have the budget and you can hire an HR veteran, so to speak, great. But if not, you have other means, potentially creative means. So it's about creativity so that you can understand what that veteran did in your organization. Now, I'm talking from an Army perspective. You know, there's Navy, there's Air Force. You use someone, they'll have a better understanding so you can say, hey, pretty good fit, or maybe not so much. Interviews. Interviews here, realize that first bullet is huge. We have never interviewed for a job before. We go through boards in the military, but we've never interviewed, sat down with you across from them. Realize we don't talk about ourselves. Everything the battalion I was in did, we did. I didn't do a single thing. The only thing I did was wake up and get dressed and go to the office. We were successful. It was a we. So many times in interviews, you want to know, well, what did you do? Well, I didn't do nothing. I just ran my mouth. That's kind of how we look at things. So you got to realize that. Now, again, Harold and the crew in transition, we're teaching guys like me and Shane to say, this is what I did. But it's hard for us because that's what we're ingrained from day one. We are a team. The other thing is, realize I've had a couple, matter of fact, Avery's sitting over here. I met with, the first trip I ever did was to Hospital Corporation of America. And one of the ladies in the room said, don't be so rigid. Well, you have to realize when we are training for boards and different things in the Army, this is how we sit. Yes, sir. No, sir. One short and sweet answer. We call it kind of sitting at the position of attention, which gives you, as an interviewer, you kind of go, ooh, that guy's rigid. Something's wrong there. Don't know. No, that's how we are. That's how we're trained. So again, we're trying to get people to relax, talk about yourself. Don't be rigid. But it helps if you can do some leading questions. That you don't want me to just say yes or no. You know, how are you today? At least have an opportunity, I can say fine, or I can open up a little bit. But expect that till they get warmed up a little bit. We will use this, this respect for that. Part of the reason we sit there, we see the interviewer as a person of authority, if you will. So we're going to show you that respect. You're going to be a sir or a ma'am. If we use military terminology, stop us and say, hey, what does that mean? You know, we have 10 billion acronyms out there, and some of them have double meanings. You know, I'm a logistics guy. We have AMC, that's Army Materiel Command, but if you talk to an Air Force guy, that's Air Mobility Command. So, don't be afraid to ask, what does it mean? And then that last bullet on there is really going back, just like the resume review. If you can bring a veteran to sit in on your hiring interview or on that panel, that's great as well. Now, if you have rules or whatever that doesn't allow that person to be a voting member or however you work it, that's fine. But at least the person's in there can say, hey, this is my feel on it. It's not a bad idea if you can afford to do that. And then next thing we talk about, so you've had access, you've recruited, you've interviewed, you looked at the resume, they applied, and you say, hey, we want to hire you. Some things we talk about is onboarding and retention. Realize we in the military have never onboarded into a civilian company. We don't understand your pay package. We don't understand benefits. We don't understand health care. This is what I know for 22 years, or if it's a young man who's only done 4 years, or woman. I have my base pay, I have a housing allowance, I have a subsistence allowance, and then if I have dependents, I have an allowance taken out for dental care. I don't pay for health care. I just go to the clinic on the installation, and that's all I know. So we come to your organization and you start talking about different pay packages and compensation, where maybe your salary is 40 grand a year, but your compensation is 120 grand a year, and I'm going, well, wait, all I know is what I want to see in my bring home check. What's that? So how do you help us educate with that? Well, several of the things is assign a sponsor, someone who can walk us through it. We don't need someone to hold our hand, but someone that I can turn to and say, hey, if you have a question about that, go see Joe. And that way Joe can tell me, well, hey, you realize, yeah, you're 40 grand, so that's your bring home, but at the end of the year, we do this dividends, stock option thing, and that's another 20 grand potentially, and then there's this bonus thing if you do this or that. We don't understand it. So having that sponsor will help. It also makes me feel good that I have somebody I can turn to. And if you can make that person a veteran sponsor another vet, that's even a bigger bonus. Affinity groups, we have a slide on that in the next one, so I'll come back to those. They're really have caught on more than I thought they would have, and I'll share a different slide, but understanding pay and compensation. So at the bottom of this chart, and I know those in the back, you can't read this. So a young man or woman leaving Fort Campbell, Kentucky, or Tennessee, just up the road, that's done 4 years in the Army, who is married, because our housing compensation is different if you're single versus if you're married. If you're married, based on all of his authorizations pay-wise, makes $47,628 a year. And so when that person gets out, that person's going to be looking for something compatible to that. Now, I know there's a lot of small companies, and I've learned over the couple years in this job that not everybody can pay that much. So we have what we call the band of acceptability. Some say it's 20%, some say it's 10%, some say it's up to 30%. The big thing is we generally know that we're going to take a step back and pay when we leave the service. However, we want to know that we can continue to move upward once I get into your organization. And why do I share this with you is because let's say your company is paying $35,000 a year. If I can't move up in your company relatively quickly, 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road and keep moving up, I'm going to look for a job somewhere else in the near future. So now you've taken time to hire me, onboard me, train me, and then 6 months or a year later, I'm walking out the door and you got to do that all over again. And so I share that with you because you need to know what that young soldier's already making. Most of us, like all of us in this room, we have commitments based on our level of compensation, and you can't take a very far step back or can't go back too far for too long before those commitments start catching up to you in other ways. So understand that compensation. And we already talked about helping us understand that. Because personal example of a young man we know from this program who got out, company told him, you're going to make $80,000 a year. Well, he did the math. That's about what I'm making right now. So that means I should be bringing home, making this part up, about $2,000 every 2 weeks. And he gets his first paycheck, and it was about $980. He's like, ooh, what's up with that? Goes in, talks to him. Well, the $80,000 was $40,000 in compensation or in pay, but then the other 40 grand included cost for health insurance, the stock options, and so on. So I can't share enough with you. That's big, is making sure that they understand that so that you can retain them in your organization. And if you can retain them in your organization, another thing going back to recruiting is we all have friends in the military. And if I come to work for you and I like your company, guess what? I'm calling my bud. I'm saying, hey, you're getting out soon. You know, I love company X. You might want to consider them too. So I'm also now a recruiter for you, and you really don't even know it. So we talked about affinity groups. And I said I passed over the bullet and talk about this. Again, this is a creative idea that has really taken hold in many companies. Some use a web page. Some actually have groups that get together and meet. These are groups for your veterans. Some companies have them for everything. They have softball teams. They have interests in many, many things. But this would be for your veterans to get together. You know, if you're a small company, you know, we're talking maybe have a bulletin board where they can come up there and they see if you're doing some sort of veterans event, or if I'm a vet and want to find others in the company, I just post my contact information up there. That's on the low end. You have companies that are dispersed. This is from Cummins. They have plants all over the country, so they actually have a web page, and they can go on there and do blog type things, and then they talk about company policy to vets and any programs coming on with them. I use Home Depot, large nationwide employer. They have a web page, but then that's turned into each store has its own little group. It's just something to consider. These are things, this would be a retention tool. And then retention means I like your company. That means I'm going to invite my other buds to come join it as well. But they do many things. Some of them are just to get together and chat, and some of them are to, they actually go out there and do community outreach. But lots of different things they can do with that. I got to throw this up there, public service advertisement. If you want to follow us, connect with us beyond the phone numbers and emails that were up there. We are on Facebook and Twitter, and our website on there, soldierforlife.army.mil, will also get you in touch with us. But we are tracked, as a lot of organizations are. If you would like us on Facebook, that would be nice. That would get our numbers up. Other these are things, I'm going to go through this last part very quick. These are resources. Don't have to write them down. You can get them off the slide deck that are good for veterans that might be in your organization, that are good for you. It has our website on here. The employer, the Veterans Employment Center is on here. The National Guard, I glossed over that. I'll tell you, if you have positions that you need to fill immediately, Harold is great up at Fort Campbell, but you also have National Guard soldiers and reserve soldiers in this state. Leverage the Workforce Commission to access those guys and gals who would be immediately, they're here right now, unless they're drilling or deployed right now today, they might be available to you. I'll come back to the question slide. I'm not going to go through here. I think I have another 4 to 6 slides after this, but just more tools that are in the slide deck where you can look at rank and what the description of what they do, that we tried to civilianize it a little bit. So these are in there. In the interest of time, I don't want to go through each one of those, but they're in the back of the slide deck for the use that you can download off the website. So with that, anyone here have any questions? Harold.
Just a comment. I know this is going to sound odd, but many of our service members don't feel like, or they don't think they're veterans. They have I can only be a veteran if I've been wounded in action, or I can only be a veteran if I've been downrange 4 or 5 or 7 times. If your website or your job application process is, are you a veteran? You're probably missing some folks. I would encourage you to change that. Have you served in the military? You're going to get a lot more feedback to that, just because we all have a different definition of what a veteran is.
All right. Thanks, Harold. Oh, okay. Any other questions, comments? Well, I'll share then, I'll close with this. If you're interested and would want to meet with us, because one of the things we like to do, every company is different, is sit down with you and talk about ideas that would work for your company. You'll have our contact information. Shane and I are here all day. We'll stay here till people want to stop talking with us. If not, you can contact us anytime. We can do this from afar over a phone, some sort of chat session, or we're always looking for reasons to get out of the Beltway, out of DC. We'd be more than happy to come back as budgets allow us to. So, because at the end of the day, for us, it's about getting veterans into meaningful employment and also helping you be successful in your jobs, in your organizations by doing so. With that, I think it's break time, but I'm going to turn it over to Beth to announce that.
Yes, just before break, let's give Shane and Steve a big round of applause and thank them for coming to join us today.